Age of Imprisonment is yet another entry in the Hyrule Warriors series, blending the characters from the Legend of Zelda franchise with the gameplay of Dynasty Warriors. And this time it's set in the distant past that Zelda was sent to during the opening events of Tears of the Kingdom. This entry is actually considered canon. This review will also be mostly spoiler-free, with the only story elements that I'll cover in any detail being things that we already knew from the events of Tears of the Kingdom. The game starts with a cutscene where a little Korok named Kalamo discovers a strange Zonai mech down in the depths, and it then cuts to Zelda. She quickly gets to know Rauru and Sonia, the first king and queen of Hyrule, being there when Ganondorf decides to try and seize power for his own, and the game then follows the events of the war that led up to the sealing of Ganondorf. The primary plot more or less follows what we already know to have happened, but it does focus on fleshing out a lot of the characters that we didn't really know all that much about. The B plot revolves around the aforementioned Korok and the construct that he awoke, as the two of them battle the forces of evil, all while looking for a place for the Korok to put down roots. Eventually, these two storylines coalesce into one. Age of Imprisonment has a very similar overall style to Age of Calamity, with quests being taken on from the world map, each of which will contribute a percentage completed in said region. There are various side quests that you can do that will provide upgrades to the various characters, and they require various materials to complete, and different shops that are unlocked throughout the map where you can buy the various materials that you need to do this. And Age of Imprisonment also brings back amiibo support, with a daily limit of 5 that can be scanned, which will give you extra materials for doing so. You'll also get some special weapons for having save files from the other Zelda games. And while I don't think the different playable characters feel quite as distinct from one another as they did in the previous title, there's still a lot of variety to choose from. Certain missions will force you to take certain characters along with you, so you do have to play as everyone at least a little bit, but unlike the previous Hyrule Warriors games, there were very few, if any, characters that I outright hated using. The combat is still heavily focused around performing combos and exploiting the weaknesses of enemies, with an expertly timed dodge often rewarding you with a quick onslaught of attacks. There are also still special moves for each character, and also a new mechanic that's introduced in the form of sync strikes, where when you have two characters that are fighting beside each other, they can then combine to do a unique attack together. Some characters can also fuse monster parts to their weapons, increasing the damage, and you can also use various Zonai machines. This adds a ton more variety to the combat, making it so that you can approach the various fights pretty much however you want. Capturing enemy bases and making sure that you don't lose them is still a key mechanic, although it's significantly downplayed compared to the original Hyrule Warriors. After Ganondorf attacks Hyrule Castle and spreads monsters throughout the land, you can then reclaim various pieces of territory from him on the map, and after a time, some of these will actually need to be defended or else you'll lose them, which mirrors the mechanic of capturing enemy bases during the stages. And another new mechanic that they have added is aside missions, which each character will have a list of, such as performing specific types of attacks or syncing with other characters. The reward for completing all of the aside missions for one character is a special dialogue that you get to read through that involves them. And while none of these special scenes really meant all that much to the story or held that much weight overall, it was nice that there was at least some kind of reward for putting in all that work. And it was definitely a lot of work to complete these aside missions. It absolutely dominated the last 2/3 of my playthrough as I tried to strategically plan things out so that I could always complete as many as possible on any given stage. One of the few negative things that I do have to say about Age of Imprisonment is that a lot of the extra characters that you get to play as don't feel particularly interesting or even necessary. And that's not to say that Age of Calamity or the original Hyrule Warriors didn't also have some filler characters, but I feel like the main ones were given something to do in the plot, while a lot of the characters in Age of Imprisonment just feel like they fully come out of left field. The sages, the king, and Zelda herself all make complete sense, but the majority of the rest just don't. The camera was one of the main issues that I did have in this game, because I found it could be very counterintuitive in terms of what it's actually locking onto and what it isn't. Once a boss type monster appears, there's really no way to lock onto anything else or look in a different direction. I also don't think that the plot is the greatest in Age of Imprisonment. Beyond planning each battle and saving a couple of characters in the field, there isn't a ton that actually happens from the moment that Ganondorf attacks the castle all the way to the end of the game. After beating the main story, you do unlock some post-game content, which is mainly just new battles, new side quests, and extra difficult boss fights. Completing every single quest and side quest in the different areas will reward you with these journals that detail the events that happened during the war, and obtaining all of them will then reward you with a special credit sequence. 100% completing the game is a rather lengthy process though. I do have some minor issues with the gameplay and story, and I do wish that it tied more heavily into Tears of the Kingdom. With everything taken into account, Age of Imprisonment is very solid and probably the best Hyrule Warriors spin-off to date, and for that reason I'd give it an A rank. Age of Imprisonment is definitely a game that will have a lot more impact if you've beaten Breath of the Wild and and Tears of the Kingdom. But even if you haven't played those titles, thanks to its fluidity, I would actually consider Age of Imprisonment the best jumping in point for the spin-off series. While it's not quite perfect, it's legitimately fun to play through, with enough content in the base game that you're not going to get bored or run out of things to do.